Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
My professor, he used to be the chief ethics officer at Airbnb. Now, if you don't know what the chief ethics officer is, bro, don't worry. I honestly didn't know either. Basically, it's the guy who makes sure the company is being ethical, making sure they're not doing anything that's like super immoral, super crazy. And this guy, we'll call him Bob, just for this example, because I want to give him at least some privacy. But anyways, my professor Bob, he's telling us this story about a time when he was at Airbnb. Airbnb is facing this dilemma, this ethical, moral dilemma, and the situation where they have to choose to go one way or the other, and it's kind of difficult where they should go. But here's the situation. Basically, what was happening in 2015, this is the real story. What was happening is that they found out some of their Airbnb hosts, the people who they put their homes up on Airbnb, some of those people, they were not allowing guests to stay at their place. And it seemed like those guests, it would seem pretty racist. Like they didn't allow them to come in based on like certain type of names, based on their profile pictures, things like that. And what originally happened is that Bob saw this, he saw what was going on, and he was like kind of concerned. What was going on? What was happening? He kind of brought it up with some of the team members at Airbnb, but they were like, no, that's not right. Like Airbnb is not about that. Our whole mission is behind like connecting people and all that stuff. It just doesn't make sense that people would do that. So they're like, they waved it off, not a big deal. But eventually Harvard put out the study like this thing is actually going on and we need to do something about that. So Bob, being the chief ethics officer, and a big part of that was making sure they don't run into any legal trouble. He goes to the founder, her name is Brian Chesky, super huge founder, super huge entrepreneur. He goes to Brian, he's like, okay, look, Brian, this is what's going on. Here's what the law says. Here's what Airbnb is liable for. And here's what we can do. Here's how we can mitigate those risks, all these different things. Like here's what the law says. Here's what we can do. And as it was going on and on and on, Brian just stops him. He says, stop, Bob. I don't care. And Bob was kind of confused. I'm sure I would be confused in that situation. Like, what in the world, Brian? You don't care? What are you talking about? And Brian kept going. He says, Bob, our mission is to connect people. Our mission is to take people outside of their computer screens into the world and have real experiences. I don't care what legal says. I don't care what finance says. I don't care what HR says. I don't care what any of that says. If we're not doing that, if we're not going after our mission, then we are failing as a company. And that, when he told that story, I don't know, it hit so hard for me because they committed to the mission. The mission is what was the lens through which they made all of their decisions. And I've heard it so many times before, but it's stories like these that reinforce that idea to me. And because of this, they eventually had the community commitment, which is basically they notify all their hosts, like, here's what we're all about. Here's like this long things, like we're not racist. We shouldn't ban guests just because of like their name or whatever. And they had this long list and they said, here's what we're all about. And at the very bottom, they gave them two options. Either they can agree or disagree. And for the hosts that agree, they can go on with their lives. For the ones who didn't agree, they booted them. They straight up removed them from the platform. And although they lost something like 1.5% of all hosts, it was that thinking, that long-term thinking, that even if we have these short-term losses, even if we lose this 1.5 whatever percent, it's the long-term that matters because that is the mission is all about. That story really hit home for me when he told it. And then another story, I think that's pretty resonant of what happened over the past week. I think I might have told this in the last episode, but basically about a week and a half ago to a weekish, I got a Bay Wheel subscription. And Bay Wheel's out here in San Francisco. It's basically just the subscription bike program. So they have a whole bunch of these like stalls every block or so. And at those stalls, you can have bikes. And so you rent them, you ride to a different stall, and then you drop it off. And then you have this subscription. But a couple days back, or it must have been, like a week or two back, I got the Bay Wheel subscription. I was like, okay, let's go. I haven't ridden a bike in a long time, but I can do this. Hop on the bike. And then mind you, this is like pretty late at night. Haven't ridden a bike in a while. So low-key, I was struggling to get on the seat, and like at every red light where I had to stop, I was struggling to start going again because I didn't know how to do it. But I was like, you know what? It's just all part of the game. It's part of the process. Let's just keep going. I keep doing that. And I made so many mistakes. First of all, there's this thing on a bike called a gear. And the gear makes it easier or harder for the pedals on the bike to move the tires. And if you go uphill, then it should be easier. And if you go downhill, it should be harder. Like there were things like that that I completely didn't understand. But even more than that, on the past 4 bike rides that I've ridden on, I have fallen 4 times. Now they weren't all like super hard falls, but I've legit fallen 4 times, bro. 4 times. The first time I was trying to go up a hill and I had it on the hardest difficulty, so I couldn't like go up the hill, so I fell. Second and third time we're on the same ride. I was going down a tunnel, and in the tunnel they had a bike lane, so I was going down there, but I was kind of getting close to the curve, and so I didn't want to get like hit it, and so I was kind of like super scared to hit it, so I fell there. And then as I got out of the tunnel, my legs were just so tired that when I came to the stop, my legs just stopped pedaling. So I fell over just because my legs gave out. And the fourth time was the worst, bro. The fourth time, I was going down the street and then there were tracks on the floor for like the trams that are out here. And note to self, and for anyone who learns how to bike, bro, you should not go parallel with those tracks because they're indentions into the ground. So what happened was I was riding, and as I was trying to like go over the lane, my tires got caught in the tracks. And so that one was the worst. I was downhill, got caught in the tracks. I literally went sliding, bro. It was like it was raining, so I fell hard and it went sliding. But the reason I tell all of this is because it reminded me a lot of a lesson I learned a while back when I started ice skating. Ice skating for the first time, I fell so much when I was ice skating, so much. But I think in life and just in general, there are 2 ways to interpret some of those mistakes, some of those failures. Either one way, okay, I made a mistake, I made a failure. I'm not good at this, and there's nothing I can do to get good at this, so I'm just gonna stay away. I'm too afraid to even touch it because I don't want to fall again. Or the second way of approaching it, which I prefer, is to say, okay, I have fallen, and it makes sense because I've never done this in my life, or I haven't done it in a long time, and I don't know these simple mistakes. But as I make these mistakes, as I make these failures, I'm still gonna push forward. I'm still gonna keep going because as I do that, I will get better at the skill, at the thing. And that's exactly what happened when I did ice skating. I think I did that a couple episodes back, or like ages back. And that happened again with biking. It's through all of these falling that I now realize all these lessons that I'm learning, and will hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully I don't fall again, but more than that, I will become a better biker. I think that was another like story / lesson that I had. Diving into the next section of the podcast. So that was the story section, story that ties into a big lesson that I had for the week. This next section, I am now calling it doubles of the week. It's going to be 2 dubs and 2 L's that I took that week, which I think was a pretty clever name. I can't lie. Doubles, like dub, and then L's, doubles, and it's 2. Okay, never mind. Doubles of the week. Okay, so we'll start off with 2 dubs. Dub number 1. I'm beginning the audio journaling again. I haven't audio journaled for actually a long time. And as I was listening back to a couple episodes that I had, I just remembered and I was reminiscing, I guess would probably be the best word for it. I was reminiscing about how important that is for me and my health and everything like that. And so diving back into it, I think has been super helpful and awesome actually to get clear on audio journaling. I kind of want to build an app for that too, but that was a big dub. And then the other dub was late night combos. I think this is a double-edged sword because late night combos are awesome with friends, with my roommates, which like stay up and we just chat and then catch up and stuff. Like that's awesome. The double-edged sword and the L that I'll take is my sleep has just been so terrible. Like absolutely horrendous. And I said this in the last episode too, but bro, I really want to work on that for sure. And then the second L, and I'll actually tell the story of this one too. In class, the program that I'm out here doing, there's these students in the class. And these students in the class, we'll describe them as like very woke. But basically a lot of their like views, opinions, they voice it out to be very loud. And I'll give an example to make a concrete case. Basically, whenever we're talking to like AI founders or we bring up technology with AI, because AI is huge, of course. They talk about, oh, data centers. They bring that in all the time, like data centers. Because what's happening is that with this rise of AI, they need data centers to process everything. And a big part of data centers is that they need to cool down. So that's where water is used. That's where a ton of energy is used. And that's why this rise of data centers that they're building is what they're arguing is like super bad for the environment. But that's basically like ground case. They keep bringing up these data centers. They keep harping on how evil AI is and how immoral AI is. And it got to this point where as they kept bringing up views like that, and then other views as well, really talking about like this victimhood mindset that they kind of have and perpetuate. No shade to them, by the way, but they kept harping on that stuff. It got to the point where I started laughing, and not only me, but like people in the class, we would kind of chuckle under our breaths. We kind of start smiling, looking at each other like, look at these people, what are they talking about? They just keep bringing up these woke ideas and stuff. And it wasn't until a specific class where we had a founder come in, super cool guy, bootstrapped his business to 600 mil. It was completely insane. Bootstrapped it completely. And the woke students, they raise their hand. They keep asking questions like basically questions about like how he got started and how he was able to raise his initial funding. Because he did raise what they call a friends and family round, which basically you go to your friends and family, you ask them for money to work on the startup. And this guy raised, I want to say a couple hundred K, like 250, and he was able to raise that and then get started on his startup. But then the question that was asked by the Wilsons are like, well, what about people who aren't in your position? Basically, what about people who aren't white males? That was kind of what they were getting at. And as they were doing that, we were kind of like looking around. It was like same situation. Here we are, guest speaker, taking time out of his day. And we're trying to learn his insights on entrepreneurship and business. And then they ask like all of these questions. And we look at each other like, oh, this is kind of like funny. We kind of start smiling. Here we go again. And then someone raised their hand and challenged all of us. It was like the energy in that room was like very intense as he raised it. He raised his hand and he says, I don't think it is respectful for people to be laughing and smiling when there was a legitimate question that was asked. And when he asked that question, I was initially like pulled back. And I kind of like took a step back, assessed the situation, really took a deep check on myself, like, what am I doing? Why am I laughing and like looking down on these students? Because I mean, to this day, I still don't agree with them, but I don't want to be the type of person who is just laughing and making fun of these people and making them feel less than. And so that was a big lesson of like, it was an L in that I was doing something that I wouldn't want my dream self, I wouldn't want my dream identity to embody. Like my dream self doesn't do that. So why am I out here just laughing at these people? So that was kind of another story/lesson that I learned from the past week. Now on to the philosophizing section. These are things that I've been thinking about. The first thing I've been thinking about this for honestly, this thing has to be years in the making. Like so long that I've been thinking about this. But it's something that I'm calling from now on the golden median. And it's when you balance objective and subjective virtues. Now that's a lot of like jargon that I just threw out there. So let's back it up. Let's assess the situation, take a step back. Here's basically the lay of the land. Ages ago, this guy named Aristotle, I'm pretty sure it's Aristotle. This guy named Aristotle, he thought of something called the golden mean. And I've talked about this a couple times, but the golden mean is the idea that we should always balance these virtues. For example, courage. The courage would be a perfect example. When you don't have enough courage, you're just a coward. Like, come on now, let's man up, have some courage. But then there are certain situations where you don't want too much courage. If you have too much courage, then you're just like reckless and in over your head. Why would you go and do something that, oh, you might think is courageous, but it's just straight up like reckless? So that's where this idea of the golden mean comes from. You don't want to be too excessive, but also you want to have that virtue. So going off that idea of the golden mean, I have termed this new thing called the golden median. And it kind of works in the exact same way as the golden mean. It's like this trying to balance two sides of a coin, but instead of balancing like too much or too little of something, this is balancing two virtues. And usually the way I've talked about this in the past is the virtue vice scale. Any virtue pushed to the extreme becomes a vice. And the scale part is trying to balance the virtues. But it's basically the exact same thing. Here's a perfect example. Let's use the example with the two woke students. When you're looking at AI, there's kind of two ways to approach it. One way is to be optimistic. The other way is to be pessimistic. Let's take two of those approaches. The optimistic approach, oh, AI is good, AI is great, and we can use it to benefit society. That's one way to take it. And that's what I think, like, that seems like a virtue. But that pushed to the extreme becomes like blind optimism, where you just look at it and you're like, oh, we should put AI into everything. And the danger of that is that you don't stop to think about the consequences that come with AI and all the ethical concerns that, bro, Elon Musk, he is not a fan of AI because of that. But how about let's take the other approach, the side of a pessimistic approach. Like, oh, AI is bad, so we should watch how we do it. And that, to me, doesn't sound like it's inherently a vice. But where it gets tricky is when you push that to the extreme. And pessimism is like, AI is evil and we should never use AI for anything. That's where it starts getting into the choppy water. And so it seems to me that when approaching a topic like AI and really anything in general, it is important to take both sides into account. To be optimistic, but also pessimistic. And although those seem to clash in some ways, I think that's what the golden median is all about, trying to find those balances. Another example, something that I've been diving into, especially with the book that I'll bring up later in the episode, is the selfish selfless paradox that I talked about ages ago. But when you think of something like being selfish and being selfless, like those two things seem to contradict each other, but it's through the golden median that you find a way to balance the two. And it's like, okay, it's not just being selfless, because when I'm too selfless, it gets to the point where I become self-destructive and I forget myself for the benefit of others, which is not inherently good. And then on the other side, like being kind of self-interested, that doesn't seem as a terrible thing. Like I want to do things that I like. It might get into choppy territories when I become selfish and I start doing things because they start costing other people. And then another example, like all these examples of balancing humility and being confident, like things like that is exactly where the golden median applies to, where you're trying to balance these two virtues. One of them is the objective virtue that's usually kind of more pessimistic, and the other one is like the subjective virtue that's usually more optimistic. That's one thing I've been thinking about. The other thing, or the next thing, is creativity within constraints. And I actually talked about this when I was given that Jumpstart challenge. And to take you guys back, there I was trying to get into this Jumpstart program where they only accept like 10 startups. And I pitched my thing. I'm like, okay, here's what I'm doing. I prepared the pitch in like within a week or whatever. And the decision they gave me was that, look, we like your energy, we like what you're about, but the only way for you to get in is if you can make $1,000 by summer. And with that challenge that they gave me, with that constraint that they gave me, it gave me like guidelines on what I can do. Because in startups, and in life in general, like there are always so many things we can do. So many things. Whenever we wake up in the morning, we could go for a walk, go for a run, go eat, like fly across the world. Like there's so many things we could do, but it's within constraints that it forces us to think outside of the box. And that's exactly what I've been thinking about with this type of thing. Because when they gave me that challenge, it was like, oh, now I have to start thinking outside the box. Now I really have to think, how am I going to make money doing this? And something that happened within the past, I think 2 weeks or a week and a half-ish, is DeepSeek came out. Now DeepSeek is like, that is the talk of the town for the past week. It literally took out billions and billions of dollars of value off of the US stock exchange, like insane amounts, because Nvidia just crashed down hard. And the reason that happened is because DeepSeek. Now what happened with DeepSeek is that they had these constraints. They don't have billions and billions of dollars they can throw at building the next model, the AI model. What they have to do is use the resources they have in a different way. So with the constraints of money, they were able to build a model, the DeepSeek model, where it has pretty on par performance with OpenAI at like cents on the dollar though, like way, way cheaper than what OpenAI was doing. And to simplify that even further, they basically can do what OpenAI models do, but instead of charging what OpenAI charges, we'll say like, I don't know, $60 or whatever, $30, DeepSeek charges 1,000th of the price, like 3 cents. You can think of it like Chipotle. You go to Chipotle, they give you like $12 burritos or whatever. And honestly, I'm not a fan of Chipotle, so we'll use Cafe Rio. You go to Cafe Rio, they give you like, they're a bit more expensive. We'll say $16 burritos. It's like, oh, this is awesome. What if a new Cafe Rio opened up? We'll call it Cafe, I don't know, Cafe Madrid. We'll call it Cafe Madrid. And Cafe Madrid, they don't charge $16 for the burrito. They charge a single dollar. And not only do they charge a single dollar, but their burrito is like insanely good, especially for the price. Like it's not to Cafe Rio standards, it's not like to that level, but it's like, it would take someone who's had a lot of burritos to tell the difference between the two. Like it's pretty difficult to tell the difference between the two. Obviously, Cafe Madrid is finna blow up and is like become huge. That's what DeepSeek did. And the reason I bring all of this up is because it hammered home something I've been thinking about, and something that I was actually learned is this idea of thinking as a business as constrained optimization, and life in general as well, where we always have these constraints. Now, some of them are like very lax constraints. Some of them are more intense where you really have to get things done in a certain amount of time. But within those constraints, The question is, how do you have the best ROI? How do you have the best efficiency? And with Indici's case, they were able to make a model that was on par with OpenAI with the limited resources they have, which is how they were able to find this new way of doing AI that's different from everyone else. Like in the Cafe Madrid case, they found a way of making burritos where it's like almost, if not like on par with Cafe Rio burritos, but way, way cheaper. And really in life, we only have these 24 hours to do stuff. Well, a ton of that is for sleeping, a ton of that is for eating. The question is, what are you going to do with the rest of the time? Especially if you allocate some of that time for family, some of that time for, I don't know, going out, all these different things that someone can do. And it's within those constraints that you find better ways to, oh, now I can be better. And actually, one of my professors was talking about this. He says that when he brings his families on all his business trips, he just gets like 10x more efficient because he has less time to do work. And because of that, he can do more work in less time because he has these constraints placed on him when he brings his families on trips. So that was the thing. I've been thinking about creativity and constraints. And then the final point that I've been thinking about is called inflection points. Now, the story behind this is one of the speakers who came in the past week. He was telling a story about the startup he was building. And as he was building his startup, he spent, man, a ton of time. I feel like close to 6, maybe even pushing 9 years, close to 9 years, just working on the startup. And after those 9 years, finally, he hit this point where Oprah Winfrey, and he had like a coupons website, like coupons.com, I think it was. But Oprah Winfrey, she announces this big coupon sale or whatever through coupons.com. And because of that, coupons.com, it went on this huge inflection point where after that moment, everything just seemed to come together and it was go time. They hit product market fit, things were starting to ramp up, and then it was like the big S curve, I think they call it, where things just increase exponentially after that. And I was thinking about this, trying to apply a similar type of concept to life, where in life, I have personally seen my personal inflection point. An inflection point for me was sophomore year of high school. I am scrolling, like doom scrolling on TikTok, staying up till, bro, call it 2, 4, 5 in the morning. Like I literally go to sleep when the sun comes out. The sun coming out was my time, like, okay, now it's time to get some sleep. That's how bad it was. And that's when I went through this inflection point of like, okay, it now is my wake up call. I can't keep doing this thing of like sitting in bed all day. I gotta start doing something at least. And that's when I started kind of working out and going on runs and all these things, watching my diet. But it was that I think was kind of the inflection point in my life where I was like, okay, it's time to actually start doing things. And then there was another inflection point, probably somewhere as a freshman, probably the start of this. That might have been the inflection point, honestly, where I started putting stuff out there, holding myself more accountable, recording the journey. I was like, okay, now it's time to start doing stuff. So I think those are important times in life, honestly, like these inflection points for sure. Now moving on to the next part, the weekly roundup. These are random finds from the week. Could be a question, a book, a quote, anything that stuck with me. The first thing was a quote that talks about this idea of true empathy. And going back to the example that I gave with the 2 woke students and how I was kind of laughing at them and really being just straight up mean is honestly what it was. What it got me thinking about is that I forgot to put myself in other people's shoes, because at the end of the day, every single person in the world, they live in their own bubble. They live through their own perspective, and all of their life experiences, all of everything they know leads up to how they are today. And the way I see it, I think it would be pretty arrogant for me to see myself, oh, if I were put in the same shoes as that person, like I would be different somehow. And the quote that I was thinking about is called, it is by a famous philosopher and mathematician guy. His name is Pascal. Actually, I think I talked about one of his big things, Pascal's wager, a while back. But one of his famous quotes is, to understand is to forgive. And it gets to this idea of having empathy for the other side, having empathy for the other person, and really trying to understand where they're coming from. So that's exactly what it's all about. And I remember this so vividly when we were sitting in this class. The guy calls everyone out, me included. He calls us out. He's like, "Hey, I don't appreciate why people are doing this. Why are you guys just being straight up rude and mean?" Our professor kind of talks us through, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, everyone, they have their own experiences and everything, and they say these things in class. But what's important to remember, what's important to understand is there is context. There's always context behind what someone says, behind someone's actions. That is the reason why they do a certain thing or say a certain thing. And that's what I think gets at to the same idea of to understand is to forgive. Like really trying to break out of the echo chamber, which we've talked a lot about today in class. The question that I've been thinking about is when we went to visit an AI company and he asked the whole group, he was like, okay, so what do you guys think of AI? Like, how are you guys using it? Are you using it a lot, maybe a little? Which parts do you like about it? Which parts do you not like about it? And I raised my hand and I was telling him about this idea that I think, and I'll actually pose as a question, is AI making us dumber? For people who are using AI, me included, a lot of it is like putting this nugget of something, some type of insight that I have into AI. I was like, okay, AI, help me brainstorm ideas for the golden median, like balancing these virtues, things like that. And then it'll give me a list of things. Maybe I'll go into it, maybe I won't. But what's happening kind of in that situation is that it's thinking for me. And in some ways, it's gotten to the point where you forget how to write. I think one of the students brought up how they've never actually written anything without ChatGPT in a while. And so they think they're losing the skill of writing. That's kind of, I could definitely see how that's possible, where we depend too much on on a calculator, for example, where you start forgetting basic arithmetic. And the question is it doing the same thing? Is it making us dumber? And after thinking about this for honestly not too long, but just like quick overview thoughts is I think AI is just a tool, just like a calculator, just like, I don't know, Google Maps. We don't have to memorize exactly where we're going. It's just a tool. For some people, it's super helpful and they use it in the right way as like a brainstorming and thinking buddy. That's what I kind of think of it as. It's my thinking buddy. I can philosophize with it, see other viewpoints, see other philosophy papers, what other people have thought about. But other people, they use it as a way to like, as a crutch, where if they didn't have AI, then they wouldn't be able to think at all. And so there's definitely more nuance to the question, but I think on the whole, it's probably not making us dumber, but definitely depends on how you use it. Moving on to the podcast that I found. This podcast, it was a rundown. Speaking of Nvidia that I brought up a bit earlier, their stock crashed hard. And it was because of DeepSeek. Because Nvidia, they make these chips, and the chips are super important for AI, but with DeepSeek, these chips aren't as important, or that's at least what the market thinks. These chips aren't as valuable because DeepSeek makes it so much easier to perform all these different tasks. So it was a deep dive into the founder of Nvidia, which his name is Jensen Huang. I honestly don't know how to pronounce it, but Jensen, I'll call him. He's a dog, man. He's a legit dog. And there were a couple of really cool takeaways I think I had. One of them he mentioned is like building your pain tolerance. Because Jensen in his life, he faced a ton of pain. He faced a ton of adversity. And he said that because he faced all of these challenges, he built up his tolerance. And so he was able to face that in the business world. Like, that's part of the reason why, I don't know, when I was reading books around World War II and the stories behind that, it like kind of reset my basis for pain, or like in some ways built up my pain tolerance. Like, look at what they're doing. What I'm going through is nothing compared to that. So kind of put things into perspectives in that way. Another takeaway I had from the podcast is one of the things Jensen and also the founder of Costco is big into this, but the idea that founders are teachers. Like, the big thing that founders have to do is teach their employees, teach their team how to do certain things and basically multiply themselves. So founders have to multiply their skills into someone else so they can do work on their behalf. And the other big takeaway is how important reputation is. When Jensen was trying to raise money for his pitch deck or for his thing that he was trying to build, even though it was a pretty bad pitch and even though the deck was kind of terrible, he still got the money. And the reason he got the money was because of his reputation as a person. So that was pretty interesting. And then another thing I found for the week was this book that I've been diving into, and I've talked about it a couple times, this idea of objectivism, which is the idea that the highest moral good is long-term rational self-interest. And the way they define it is pretty nuanced, honestly, and I'm not completely sold on it, so I still have to keep reading, keep diving into it. But if nothing else, it's a really fascinating view. I think that people should stop demonizing being selfish is kind of what it's getting at, and what I agree with. The part that I don't necessarily agree with and that I think objectivism is about is it also kind of demonizes being selfless, which I also don't agree with. Like, how are you gonna try to get people to not demonize being selfish, but then try to demonize being selfish? Like, yeah, that part doesn't really make sense to me. So I'll keep reading it, see how it goes. And then the final thing that I found for the week was these two articles. And I think it's kind of interesting when you look at these venture capitalists. Venture capitalists, they basically make these like huge bets. They're not even huge bets. They make these bets on how they think the world is gonna go. And they put out what's called investment theses. And these are the framework or the thinking that they think the world is going to go, the direction they think it's going to take. And the cool part that I think is that they're putting their money where their mouth is. So you have all of these super smart VCs. The smart part is debatable. Some people hate VCs, other people love them. But you have these smart people, and they're writing out these features of how they think the world is going to go. They spend years and years in the industry, and they make it succinct into one paper. And in that paper, they have a prediction on how the world is going to go, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. Like that, I think is super powerful in how much learning one can have just by reading one of these. And so those are the two articles. One is about AI voice agents. Like now we can use voice AI to make a whole podcast basically, but it's the rise of AI voice. And then the other one was talking about what's called B2B vertical SaaS, which is basically like businesses or software that sell or are specialized for restaurants. Like restaurants have one big player, and that's Toast. And the reason Toast is so huge and so successful is because they have literally focused on one specific type of business, and that is small restaurants. I think they've grown to bigger restaurants, but that's the basic idea. So those two investment theses were kind of cool. And then moving on to the important stuff, my life update. This is an update on the four most important areas of my life: my God, myself, my people, and my work, in that order. Now, the first thing, update on my God. I think last episode I was kind of touching on this, the like self-reflecting and how I want to self-reflect more because I've kind of forgotten how to be bored. And I've definitely done that more, where I've tried to build in new habits to help me self-reflect more. One of them is not going on my phone, not scrolling on it, set it on the toilet. But another big part is a habit that I'm building called the Sisu habit. And the Sisu is just Jesus in Tongan. But the Sisu habit is when I grab my necklace that I wear all the time and I take a deep breath. And in that deep breath, I remind myself of who I want to become. And the reason this is a big update on my God is because of its connection to Jesus Christ. Like the person I want to become is Jesus Christ. And so implementing that habit in my life has honestly been phenomenal. Like self-reflecting even now on that has been really, really awesome. And I think that's just one step toward the person I want to become, which is great. Next thing, update on myself. What's also kind of cool is that I've been staying on top of my diet, and I think everything, I talked about this in past episodes too, but it seems like everything kind of falls in place when I put God first. And so I think a large part of the reason why things seem to be falling in place is because really trying to focus in and put God first has done a lot. But my diet has been pretty on top of it. And then like I mentioned, getting back into audio journaling has been super helpful. Moving on to my people, like I mentioned, late night combos with like roommates and friends, I think that's awesome. Just gotta stay on top of sleep, man. I think I need to prioritize sleep more, or I want to do that more. And we're actually planning some trips in the near future. I think this weekend going to Yosemite, and a couple weeks later we'll be out to like one of the beach areas near SF. And the final thing, update on my work. One thing is that I had another interview today for another startup. Honestly, didn't feel too happy with my performance or like too strong about how I did. I doubt I will get the second round. Besides that, I'm trying to establish like new deep work routines. So really trying to get more work done in less amount of time is the big goal of what I'm trying to go after, especially with work. But yeah, honestly, the past week and a half-ish has probably been the most productive I've been in a long time. And like I mentioned, I think a large part of that is because I'm putting God first. But I think that's mostly everything for the updates. Yeah, this has honestly been a pretty long episode. And I forgot to mention, at the beginning of this podcast, I was going to mention, bro, it's been 2 years. Like, that's crazy. It's been 2 years since I started this podcast, which is insane. And I've had so much learnings. And it's honestly the reason why I've been going back and listening through like the very first podcast that I put out there. And also the year mark where I was in it for a year. Now I'm in it for 2 years. That's crazy to me. The fact that I started this as an 18-year-old who literally had no idea what I was going to do. Still today, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but we play it by ear. At the end of the day, like, I am happy that I've been in this game for, wow, 2 years so far. Here's to another 2. Let's see, in 2 more years, I'll be out of college and, bro, I'll probably be working, bro. That's crazy. bro, 2 years from now, I hope I'm back in SF working at a startup. So, well, maybe I'm not, maybe I am, but Dean in the future, bro, I hope you are, if you're not in SF working at a startup, I hope you're at the very least working on something that you're super passionate about and doing it with people that you love working with. And yeah, calling the fam every day, of course. But hope things go well on your side of things. I'll see you in another 2 years, Teen in the future. That's already super weird thing to say. I don't care. Oh well, we'll see how things go. I'll catch y'all later.